Emily, a 39-year-old woman from a quiet Midwestern town, always envisioned a simple, content life grounded in love and stability. She married her college sweetheart, Nathan, in their early 20s, both wide-eyed with hope and determination to build a life together. Though they didn't have much in terms of wealth or luxury, they cherished the little things: late-night talks, Sunday morning pancakes, and shared dreams of a future filled with family and peace. After years of saving, they moved into a modest rental house nestled in a calm suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The house had a cozy charm, a tiny garden where Emily spent her afternoons, and a backyard where they imagined future cookouts and quiet evenings under the stars. For Emily, this house represented the beginning of their next chapter, a space to grow and reconnect as husband and wife. But while Nathan's job required frequent travel, leaving Emily alone for long stretches, she remained optimistic, holding tightly to the belief that their love could endure any distance. She never expected that her quiet, stable life would soon be disrupted not by distance, but by something much more personal, something she couldn't have predicted when they first walked through that front door. As Nathan's business trips grew longer and more frequent, Emily found herself spending more time alone in the house they had once dreamed would bring them closer. What had started as a peaceful solitude slowly turned into a deep sense of isolation. During those quiet days, the only regular visitor was Mr. Collins, their landlord, a man in his early 60s who lived nearby and had a reputation for being friendly and attentive. At first, Emily welcomed his occasional check-ins. He was helpful, always polite, and spoke fondly about the neighborhood. But over time, his visits became more frequent and less about the house. He would appear unexpectedly, sometimes just to chat or ask how she was doing. Emily, craving any form of adult interaction, tried to convince herself it was harmless. Yet she couldn't ignore the subtle shift in his demeanor, the way his compliments lingered too long, the way his eyes watched her movements with intensity. One afternoon, while she was tending the garden, he asked if she was truly happy in her life. The question caught her off guard. Though she responded with a smile, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he was probing something deeper, something she hadn't even admitted to herself. His words unsettled her, but they also echoed a truth she was trying hard to avoid. She did feel distant from Nathan, and she often felt invisible. That evening, as she sat alone on the couch with a book in her lap and silence surrounding her, Emily realized Mr. Collins's visits had filled a void she hadn't acknowledged. She knew the line between concern and something more had begun to blur. And while she hadn't crossed it, the temptation to feel seen, truly seen, was becoming harder to ignore. The seed of confusion had been planted, and it was quietly beginning to grow. It was during a rainy Tuesday evening, while preparing a simple chicken dinner, that Claire felt the heavy knot of dread settle deep in her stomach. She wasn't expecting anyone, so the sudden ring of the doorbell startled her. When she glanced out the kitchen window and saw Mr. Whitman, her landlord, standing with his familiar warm smile, she instinctively wiped her hands on a towel and tried to steady her breath. She knew something felt off. Still, she opened the door. His presence had grown more frequent over the past few weeks, and each time his demeanor edged further from polite to personal. That evening, he didn't bother with the usual pretense of checking on the house. Instead, he complimented the smell of her cooking, lingered in the doorway longer than necessary, and then asked if they could sit down and talk. Caught off guard and uncertain, Claire agreed. She led him to the living room, where they settled into their usual seats, his closer than ever before. What followed was not casual small talk. Mr. Whitman began speaking about life, change, and the need to feel alive. Then, without warning, he confessed that he had felt a special connection to her since they first met. Claire's heart pounded in her chest. Though his words weren't aggressive, they carried an unsettling emotional weight. She sat frozen, unsure how to respond, torn between shock and the pressure to remain composed. When he finally stood to leave, Claire exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She was overwhelmed by what had just occurred. The line between a landlord's kindness and inappropriate affection had just been clearly crossed. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay beside her husband, eyes wide open, knowing that something had shifted and nothing would be the same again. After that evening, Claire couldn't shake the lingering discomfort that followed Mr. Whitman's unexpected confession. Though he had left politely, his words echoed in her mind like a warning bell she couldn't ignore. Days turned into weeks, and his visits didn't stop. They became more frequent, more intimate, and far less professional. He no longer bothered with excuses about house maintenance. Instead, he arrived with vague reasons, lingering far too long and speaking to her in tones that felt increasingly personal. Each time he stepped into her home, Claire's anxiety grew. She felt as if she were being watched, evaluated, even pursued. She tried brushing it off as overthinking. After all, he had always been kind. But now, even the compliments he gave made her skin crawl. She found herself replaying their conversations in her mind, questioning what she might have done to encourage this, though deep down she knew she had done nothing wrong. The real problem wasn't what she had done, it was what she hadn't done, drawn a clear boundary. Claire feared that confronting Mr. Whitman might create conflict or damage their rental situation, but the emotional toll it was taking on her was undeniable. She hadn't told Adam, her husband, anything yet. How could she, without sounding paranoid or worse, guilty? But with each visit, her guilt grew, not because she'd done something wrong, but because she hadn't stopped something that was starting to spiral. Her thoughts became consumed by anticipation and dread, waiting for the next knock at the door. Claire began to avoid being home alone, altering her schedule to reduce the chances of another accidental encounter. What once felt like a safe, quiet home had slowly become a place of emotional tension, and she knew that something had to change, soon, before things escalated further. One quiet Tuesday evening, as Claire was chopping vegetables for dinner, her sense of unease deepened into something more tangible. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, and her heart skipped a beat. She looked out the window, and there stood Mr. Whitman once again, wearing that familiar, polite smile. Though she forced a smile and allowed him in, her instincts screamed that this was not just another neighborly check-in. Inside the house, the atmosphere shifted. He complimented her cooking, her home, even her presence. Words that once felt friendly now carried an underlying tension. When he suggested they sit down and talk, Claire felt her stomach tighten. Still, out of politeness or habit, she agreed. What followed wasn't a conversation about rent or repairs, but something far more personal. Mr. Whitman began speaking about life, change, and the need for meaningful connection. His tone grew increasingly intimate, and before long, he confessed to feeling a deep connection with her. He called her special, admired, different from anyone else. Claire froze. Her mind raced for a way out. Though she was flattered in the most uncomfortable way, her commitment to Adam remained her anchor. Summoning all her strength, she firmly responded, making it clear that she was married, loved her husband, and wasn't interested in anything beyond a respectful tenant-landlord relationship. Mr. Whitman didn't argue. He merely nodded and stood to leave, disappointment evident in his eyes. As the door closed behind him, Claire sat motionless, trying to process the moment. Though she felt a brief wave of relief for finally speaking her truth, it was quickly replaced by anxiety. She knew this interaction had changed something irrevocably. Even if he had accepted her boundaries verbally, the emotional current in the room had said otherwise. And for Claire, this encounter marked a turning point, one that couldn't be undone. After that emotionally charged conversation with Mr. Whitman, Claire tried to move on as if nothing had happened. She hoped setting clear boundaries would put an end to the tension that had quietly invaded her home, but deep down, she knew the situation wasn't entirely resolved. Days passed uneventfully until one afternoon when the doorbell rang again. Her heart sank before she even checked. Something inside her already knew who it was. She opened the door to find Mr. Whitman standing there with his usual careful tone and measured smile. He said he just wanted to check in, but Claire could feel there was more beneath the surface. He brought up their last conversation, admitting he'd thought a lot about it. He insisted he respected her boundaries and didn't mean to make her uncomfortable. But Claire knew this wasn't just a neighborly visit. There was still a quiet persistence in his eyes, something unresolved. Taking a deep breath, Claire reinforced her stance once more. She told him clearly that her focus was on her marriage with Adam, and that their relationship should remain strictly professional. She thanked him for understanding, but firmly repeated that her commitment was to her husband and her home. Mr. Whitman nodded, his expression softer this time, tinged with sadness but acceptance. As he turned and walked away, Claire stood frozen in the doorway. It was hard to feel relieved. Instead, she felt the emotional exhaustion of navigating a situation she never asked for. That night at dinner, as she sat across from Adam, she felt more grounded but also more aware. The experience had shaken her, but it had also solidified her priorities. In that moment, she knew for certain she had made the right decision, and she hoped it would finally be the last time she'd have to defend her boundaries. That evening, Claire and her husband Adam sat down for dinner in the quiet comfort of their modest home. For the first time in what felt like weeks, Claire allowed herself to be fully present in the moment. The table was set, the candles flickered gently, and the sound of silverware against plates filled the space where silence had recently become all too familiar. As they ate, Adam looked up and noticed the shift in her demeanor. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice full of care but tinged with curiosity. Claire smiled softly, trying to keep the swirling emotions inside from surfacing too visibly. "Yeah, just thinking," she replied. She didn't tell him the whole truth, not yet. But sitting across from him, she realized how much she valued the life they had built together, and how close she had come to jeopardizing it emotionally, even unintentionally. The recent events with Mr. Whitman had stirred up a storm inside her, but that storm also reminded her of what truly mattered. It wasn't about fleeting attention or unspoken admiration. It was about the loyalty, safety, and genuine love she had always found with Adam. As he reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand, a sense of peace settled over her. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Claire understood then that the path forward wasn't about denying what had happened. It was about choosing where to go from here. She would no longer allow uncertainty or misplaced feelings to linger in their lives. That night, as they cleaned up dinner together, shared stories from their day, and eventually curled up on the couch, Claire knew she was exactly where she belonged. In that stillness, her commitment felt stronger than ever. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. In the days following her confrontation with Mr. Whitman, Claire was determined to regain control of the emotional spiral she had been caught in. She tried to bury the tension, telling herself that setting clear boundaries was enough to put things behind her. But something lingered: guilt, confusion, and a gnawing uncertainty that refused to be silenced. Every quiet moment seemed to bring it all back, replaying conversations, glances, and the uncomfortable weight of a connection she never wanted. Then one afternoon, unexpectedly, the doorbell rang. Her stomach dropped when she saw Mr. Whitman standing there again, wearing the same polite smile that had once seemed harmless. Claire hesitated before opening the door, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and frustration. "Just wanted to make sure everything was still good with the house," he said casually, but his tone carried a subtle weight, as if he was fishing for more. This time, Claire didn't allow the moment to stretch into ambiguity. With a calm but firm tone, she reminded him that she was married, committed to her husband, and that their relationship would remain strictly professional. Mr. Whitman looked disappointed, but nodded in acceptance. As he turned and walked away, Claire closed the door and leaned against it, her breath trembling with relief. She knew this wasn't just about rejecting someone's feelings. It was about protecting her life, her integrity, and the man she loved. That encounter solidified something within her. The lines had been crossed once, but they would not be crossed again. It was time to close the chapter for good, to take responsibility for what had happened emotionally, and to heal from the weight of it. With each step forward, Claire reminded herself that her marriage wasn't something to escape. It was something to fight for. That evening, after Mr. Whitman left for what Claire hoped was the last time, she sat down to dinner with her husband, Adam. The table was set simply: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and 2 glasses of iced tea. But for the first time in weeks, Claire felt truly present. The emotional weight of the past days hadn't vanished, but something had shifted. As they ate, Adam glanced up and asked, "Everything okay? You've been quiet lately." Claire paused, then smiled gently. "It's just good to have you home," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. Adam reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's good to be home," he replied. In that moment, Claire realized how far she had drifted emotionally, not just because of Mr. Whitman, but because she had stopped seeing the love in front of her. Her marriage hadn't been perfect. What marriage was? But it had always been built on trust, commitment, and genuine care. She had nearly let a stranger's attention distract her from that foundation. Now, with Adam looking at her as though she was still the woman he fell in love with, Claire felt something else: resolve. She would no longer allow guilt, confusion, or the echoes of temptation to cloud her view. Moving forward would take effort, honesty, and perhaps some uncomfortable conversations, but she was ready. As they cleared the dishes and settled onto the couch together, Claire rested her head on Adam's shoulder, breathing in the quiet familiarity of their shared life. No dramatic declarations were needed, just presence, just intention. She didn't need to confess every detail to make things right. She needed to be present, to choose him again and again. And in doing so, Claire knew they had a chance, not just to survive, but to begin again, stronger and wiser. In the days that followed, Claire found herself reflecting deeply on everything that had unfolded with Mr. Whitman. Although he hadn't crossed any explicit boundaries, the emotional tension and suggestive undertones of their interactions had left a lasting impression. She understood now that vulnerability didn't always come from grand gestures or dramatic affairs. It could begin in silence, in eye contact held too long, or in unspoken thoughts that filled the spaces between conversations. What troubled Claire most wasn't the awkwardness of rejecting Mr. Whitman. but the realization that her own emotional distance had invited something dangerous into her life. She had allowed herself to feel seen by another man because she had stopped feeling seen in her own marriage. That understanding shook her, but it also gave her clarity. She had to take ownership of how far things had gone, even if nothing physical ever happened. And more importantly, she had to commit to rebuilding her emotional connection with Adam. She started by being more intentional, asking about his day, listening without distraction, and sharing parts of herself she had kept locked away. Their conversations grew more honest. There were difficult moments, but there was also laughter, small gestures of affection, and a renewed sense of partnership. Claire didn't feel entirely healed, but she felt stronger. As for Mr. Whitman, she avoided further contact, and thankfully, he respected her boundaries. Yet she knew deep down that the experience would remain with her, not as a source of shame, but as a lesson. A reminder of how easily emotional needs can go unmet and how quietly temptation can creep in. Claire's marriage had survived, not because it was perfect, but because she chose to fight for it. And in doing so, she rediscovered something she had nearly lost: her commitment to the life and love she had built. This story offers a powerful reflection on emotional boundaries, vulnerability, and the importance of honest communication in long-term relationships. Through Claire's experience, we're reminded that emotional neglect, however unintentional, can open the door to misunderstandings, misplaced attachments, and even emotional infidelity. It shows how dangerous it can be when someone outside a relationship begins to fill a void left unaddressed. More importantly, it emphasizes the value of setting clear boundaries, recognizing internal conflicts, and choosing to repair what truly matters. While Claire never physically cheated, her emotional confusion served as a wake-up call, one that many people in committed relationships might quietly relate to. The story is not about blame, but about awareness, choice, and rediscovery. It reminds us that love isn't just about passion or routine. It's about being present, seen, and emotionally engaged with the one we've committed to. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect on your own experiences, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to like, subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts or feelings. Your engagement helps us bring more meaningful content to life.